Welcome to Wake Up with Marci, a deep dive into self-discovery. I'm your host, Marci Hopkins, and this is the space where we get real about life, transformation, and finding our true selves. Dr. Yasmine, welcome to Wake Up with Marci. I'm so excited to have you here and have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So this is really an important subject, and I think there's over 11% of the population in the United States suffer with diabetes, some sort of diabetes. And you yourself at one point were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Can you share with us what was going on for you at that time? How did that impact you and and change your life?
Well, diabetes has always been a huge part of my life, honestly. And so my dad, he's a diabetic, and 3 out of 5 of his siblings are also diabetic. And then his dad was diabetic. And so I saw, my grandfather died from diabetes at a very young age.
Mhm.
And so my mom also suffered from obesity. And so both of them, were over, 300 pounds, 350 pounds respectively when they got married. And so for myself and my brother, they were very focused my whole life on preventing this disease because they saw firsthand the complications.
Right.
And so my grandfather on my dad's side died when I was very young. His mom died in her 60s, and my mom's mom died in her 60s. And so we're very well aware that this was something genetically on both sides that might impact me. So I was on a low carb diet, the Atkins diet, if you remember. That was
Mhm.
very big, I feel like,
Yeah.
when I was a child. And so they would send me with, hamburger patties, no bun for school, and just low carb. And I actually felt okay about that, because I thought I could beat this if I just eat a certain way, if I exercised. And they had me playing from the age of 4, tennis for hours, so every
Yeah.
day after
Mhm.
school, they made sure I exercised. They were not, they were all about, reversing this, generational cycle of metabolic dysfunction for sure.
Right.
So for me, I thought I was killing it. I really did. I was all about low carb. I drank Diet Coke from the time I could remember. And and I thought it was actually a good thing. I was never obese as a child, but I would maybe considered overweight, but really based on the BMI scale. But if I look at pictures back then, I was definitely, I would say, athletic.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
and it wasn't until, my dad, he's a physician, he's a pulmonologist, and I wanted to go work with him in the practice. So I went to med school, and my plan was never to go into this because I thought it was just as easy as eating low carb.
Yeah.
Um, then when I went into residency, I saw my uncle die from diabetes. He had a heart attack as a complication of it. And so that was, a real shocker because he was a doctor and he was doing all the right things. And then he
Mhm.
died. And then I realized there's more to this than just controlling the blood sugar,
Yeah.
with not eating carbs. And so I got checked out at that point. I wound up developing gestational diabetes. And then after that, I thought, okay, I'll lose the weight and it'll go away. Just go back to my low carb diet. I'll be
Mhm.
fine.
Yeah.
Well, no, it stuck, and then I didn't lose the weight, and so
Mhm.
that's when I realized I'm just like them and that what I was trying to do didn't work, and I got very nervous because I thought either I'm gonna have to go on a bunch of medication or maybe have to do bariatric surgery to reverse this thing,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so that was definitely, a low point. I felt very helpless at that time, and that's when I decided to become an endocrinologist, to become an ultimate expert in diabetes, and so that's kinda how that all happened for me.
So they spoke with you at a very young age about what was going on, why you were eating a certain way and keeping active,
Oh, yeah, my dad used to
right?
say food is energy. He
Okay.
definitely ingrained that from a young age, that this is not, like, something we do kind of for pleasure, and then my mom would be like, "But it can taste good and we can have fun too." But
Yeah.
it didn't feel restrictive, it just felt like these are my genetics and you know what I mean, and I'm
Yeah.
combating them, and that was the smart.
Right.
I thought they did me such a service, for sure.
Right. So it wasn't like leading to an eating disorder or anything like that.
No, that developed later for sure. I think when I started to realize, when I stopped playing competitive tennis and literally doing everything perfect, that, I was in residency, not sleeping, I ballooned up instantly. And then
Mm.
stress totally affected me. I was
Mhm.
very nervous about getting, the best grades or writing this many papers and the
Yeah.
typical things that happen with overachievers,
Mhm.
um, and honestly anyone. And so that's when it started to affect me because then My weight was uncontrollable. My sugar, it was uncontrollable. Even if I looked at a chip funny, right, that sugar was going to spike. And I really, really felt all of it. And I also saw the difference in how it was treated, right? Weight stigma is huge.
Yeah.
So I was having severe neuropathy, which is, pain in the nerves.
Mm.
Because my back, I had dextroscoliosis.
Oh,
And
goodness.
so when I went to go get checked out, right, they didn't even examine me. They just thought it was my weight. Go
Yeah.
to find out after like begging for an MRI that basically I had an abnormal curvature of my spine. This was
Mm.
neuropathy. And then,
Mhm.
going through that and being treated in the medical system in a different way because of my weight it was horrifying,
Yeah.
and it took a while to figure out that I actually had PCOS, which is a disease that causes insulin resistance. And I had no clue, and so
Right. Right.
again, just weight stigma and all the things that happen with that, right? And so even in medical school, I could tell, people judge me, right? You're going to med school about,
Mhm.
people who are healthy, right? And
Right.
I was
Right.
definitely judged, and it was as if like, I just binge eat all day or something like that, and so that was hard. And then of course what happens, you get bored, you start emotional eating, you do different things like that. And I would say my unhealthy relationship with food started after, for sure. It wasn't from when I was a kid.
So let me ask you. So you're diagnosed. How were they treating you? And
Mhm.
and what were you noticing? Was it making any change for you? Like, what did you start doing to make the change for yourself? Because I don't think it was helping you, which is why you dug deeper.
The first thing they tell you when you're diagnosed is to diet, exercise, and lose weight. But the thing
Mhm.
was, I was already doing those things. And so then
Mhm.
the next step is here's metformin for almost every diabetic. They want to give you medications right away. And I
Mhm.
just really didn't want to accept that. I didn't really like that idea. So,
Mhm.
obviously, when you have gestational diabetes, with my child, I did what they said. I wasn't going to like question anything, it's my son's health. But once that was done, then I said, okay, I'm figuring this out, like no doubt about it. So
Mhm.
that's when I started my fellowship and I started learning, real evidence based strategies. And from that, I was able to, formulate a way to start lowering my sugar. So I got controlled with that. That got me
Mhm.
controlled.
Yeah.
But the next step was, really changing my, eating patterns and how I felt about food.
Mhm.
So that, came partially with my obesity specialization, but then also honestly by getting coached. So I went to therapy and that took a good look back and looking at things, but I also got coached a lot and learned how to stop things like emotional eating, mindless eating, habit eating, all these other root causes of things that lead to insulin resistance.
Right.
And then after that, I saw a functional practitioner.
Mhm.
And then after that, that's when I really got to a lot of the root causes of what was really going on, why I probably developed diabetes to begin with, and that this doesn't have to happen to everyone. And if it does, you can reverse it. And so once I did that, that was the moving point. So the first step, my training, I got to figure out how to lower the sugar, right? Which is a big part of it, right? You need to lower the sugar. It causes
Well, how do you do
inflammation.
that?
Well, that's a lot. Part of it is when you eat, how you eat, even the order in which you eat, right?
Wow.
Your foods.
Mm.
So there's so much to it.
And that's
And
so does that have to do with the digestion? Like what hits your stomach first when you say in
exact
what order? Okay.
yes, we call it
Mhm.
nutrient sequencing, which is when
Mm.
you eat protein and fat before the carbs. If
Mm.
you do that, it changes everything. The same plate, you could eat it in a different order, and your sugar would drop 50 more points by
Wow.
eating the protein and fat first.
Wow.
It's amazing. And so those are the kind of things we learned, in endocrinology, obviously besides medications, but we learned about the order in which you eat or when you move, right? Example, walking after a meal really can uptake that glucose so much quicker because our muscles uptake the glucose. So
Mm.
little things like that that were able to help me control the sugar. But then after that, during my obesity specialization and really digging into like, why I was overeating and all these kind of things, targeting that, stop the yo-yo, which would be like,
Right.
that restriction, 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 and then binge and then feel shameful about it, really getting that. And then the next step was really getting to the root causes of why my sugar was high in the beginning, that
Right.
functional, that holistic perspective. And then once I did that, now I can have a carb and nothing would happen to my sugar. So that's
Mm.
where the needle moved completely. And
Right.
so it took all of it, and making it step by step,
Of
to do
course,
that.
I'm sure there's so much to it, but I want to touch on the mindset around food. And so for me, um, my addiction was alcohol. And so I'm almost 10 years sober. I had to do a lot of things to change my thought processes and how I thought about myself, right? Because at the root of it, it was from my trauma and the way that I felt about myself.
Yeah.
So I would you say that that is a form of addiction, like eating, overeating, binging,
A
starving
hundred,
yourself, like
a
right.
hundred, 100,000 gazillion percent. So
Mhm,
my mom, so she was obese her whole life and ultimately wound up doing bariatric surgery after failing every diet. I mean, she and I both had tried 150 diets. I remember going to Weight Watchers with her,
mhm,
as a child and sitting in
mhm,
her meetings, right? And things would work for a period of time and then bounce back. Well, after her surgery, she developed what about 10% of people who undergo gastric bypass surgery do, which is called addiction transfer.
mm,
So it's when people who are addicted to food transfer their addiction, and she actually became an alcoholic. Thank God she's sober.
yes,
So,
good,
my mom, she's my best friend. She's my kid's gam gam, and she's the best, But this
yes,
thing that happened, no one even realizes was a medical complication of trying to fix one addiction without actually getting to the root cause of the addiction to begin with. So, yes,
exactly,
it's
mhm,
an absolute addiction. Now, it doesn't have to be yes, some people have it worse than others where they're very aware they're addicted to food and they're obsessed with food, but for some of us, right, that addiction is not, very transparent, right? It's
mhm,
not very obvious. So for me, I wasn't a big cook, didn't really think about food, but I would just eat. I would just eat to
mindlessly
buffer.
eat, yeah,
Yeah, buffer. It could be from boredom. It could be to procrastinate all the work we have to do, especially as women, right? I
right,
would find myself, cleaning out the kids' dishes, right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
then picking out their plate while I'm doing it just to avoid the next task I had to do, you
yeah,
know? And
yeah.
instead of just doing something good for myself, right? It just stayed at the
So
kitchen table.
would you
Yeah,
say that cortisol had a part in that also because of your overstressed? I mean
totally.
yeah.
Yep, definitely. A lot of definitely different things growing up, even though the eating a low carb diet didn't stress me out growing up. I had a lot of other trauma and different things that happened in my life where I felt that that stress built up over time and I never dealt with it. I just kind of put my head down and I would basically focus on the next thing and my career or whatever it
Mhm.
was to avoid dealing with any of it,
And
you know?
I just wanna touch on you m a lot of people think of trauma kinda like maybe what I went through, right? There's different levels of trauma. But you having to deal with so many people passing your loved ones, like the grief and not really understanding how to process that as a young person must have been really difficult.
It was, and I think I didn't have, and everyone's different, right?
Right.
I'll put it this way: my program, it's not like our only focus, but I didn't have a good relationship. I think at the time with a higher, spiritual power at the time,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so when I was dealing, with grief, I didn't deal with it at all. I
Mm.
think that didn't sit well with me, and I definitely was. Whenever something was hard, I would definitely want to go to the next. Even things like
Avoidance, right? Yeah.
I moved away. Yeah, I moved away in high school. I had gone,
Mhm.
through a period of grief, a lot of trauma in high school, and it was my freshman year. And I was actually, local. I was here, and then I moved to South Carolina at a tennis academy just to avoid, And so
Mhm.
it's one of those things that happens. And I think a lot of us, I think in this world in general, I think a
Yeah.
lot of people are dealing with it. I think it's more than not. I'll put it that way.
It's easier to do that, but actually we think it's easier, but then we always pay for it later
Always
on.
pay for it. Yep.
Yeah, it always comes
Always.
back.
With a
So
vengeance.
with a vengeance is right. I get that. So can you share a little bit, like we're talking about the diabetes and I don't know that much about it. So I'm so happy that we're having this conversation. And my Aunt Melinda actually was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and she ended up dying of a heart attack. Um, at a young age, and I don't know that I think the stress of just everything on her heart, with medically what she was dealing with. But the next thing that I wanted to that you talk about is insulin resistance. Can you share with us exactly what that is and what's happening to us?
Yep. So basically, when you're a type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic or anyone with insulin resistance, the thing is that you have a pancreas that secretes insulin, and its job is to go to our cells and almost like a key, open up the cell doors and let the
Mhm.
glucose come into the cell and give us energy, right?
Right.
And so, and that glucose, right, that energy is supposed to go to, it goes to a lot of places, but predominantly it's supposed to go to three places: the muscle, the liver, and the fat. Okay.
Mhm.
But when that insulin isn't able to open that cell door, so open up the cell, what ultimately winds up happening is that's insulin resistance. So the glucose can't get in the cell, it stays in the bloodstream and eventually leads to elevated blood sugars.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that is that insulin, when sugar is high, it's a state of inflammation all over the body and affects every single cell of the body, which is why diabetes can cause a gazillion complications like stroke, heart disease, neuropathy. You see people missing limbs, people who go blind.
Mm.
You name it, diabetes, fatty liver, you name it, diabetes causes it. An example like your
Right.
aunt, right? So she had her heart, right? Her
Mhm.
vessel, she had plaque, right? A lot of us, right? We all develop plaque
Yes.
at some
Yes.
point. But the difference between a diabetic who has plaque versus someone who doesn't is that that inflammation from the diabetes has that plaque break off. And that's when it clogs the artery, stops oxygen from going to the body, and causes that heart attack. And that's what kills you. So
Oh,
that's why diabetes is the silent killer that's killing us. It
yes.
causes chaos in the body, every single cell.
Wow. I mean, it's just crazy when you don't understand a disease, right? That's why it's so important to get educated. And so that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation so you can help somebody out there or at least someone that they know or love. So let's talk about your approach. How are you helping others?
So basically, what I found, now that I've been in clinical practice, for a bit, is that, and I see, a lot of patients a day. And so there's different awareness levels or education levels, right, for diabetes. And unfortunately, the way the medical model is that they come in, you get a few minutes with them, right? And,
Mhm.
and people know the insurance model is terrible, basically. If you, so a patient, we may get reimbursed maybe $20 for a visit. So to keep any business running, right, and not even business, any hospital, any government, anything, you need to see a lot of patients, and there's not enough time to do the education that's needed. The other problem is that unfortunately, the way we're taught in the medical model is that everyone gets the same script, right? You start with metformin, that doesn't work. Ozempic or an SGLT2 inhibitor, and it's the same algorithm. So everyone's on the same meds, but the problem is their root causes aren't the same at
Right.
all,
Yeah.
and where they're at in their understanding of diabetes isn't the same. So my method is that basically we start at the top of the pyramid to get bang for buck to start lowering those sugars, right? We need to lower the sugars first. And so they learn to understand diabetes. Actually, everyone has to go through the same first education, just understanding diabetes, really
Mhm.
understanding why it happened, what's going on. And
Mhm.
so from there, we focus on lowering the blood sugar, eating in a certain way so that our cells can start to heal, right?
Mm.
Because if the
Mhm.
cells can heal,
Yeah.
right, if they can start responding to the insulin better again, well, then you can reverse it. So it's targeting each and every root cause of that, depending on what your root cause is. And then from there, targeting all the causes of overeating, because although not every diabetic, about 80 to 90% of pre-diabetics and diabetics are overweight or obese. It's just the
Mhm.
truth, it's just the stats.
Yeah.
So we do need to target that for a good majority of us. Not everyone, but a good majority of us. And then it's learning how to deal with the other things that have nothing to do with that, but also actually cause that. Things like sleep, things like how
Mm.
to nurture your body, build dopamine, the happy hormone, right? That we
Yeah.
used to get from sugar or
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? Everyone has their dopamine fix. It could
Yeah.
be alcohol, drugs, food, whatever it is, sex, you name it. So the reality is we need to find ways to build dopamine and that happy hormone another way. Or then after resisting for a few months, we're going to go right back to the old cycle.
Mhm.
And so it really goes from the ground up. So no matter where you are in your journey for diabetes, if you're newly diagnosed or you think you know everything, you're going to learn something here and you're going to get through it. And the other thing is you need to have coaching, and community. As you know, from anything with any 12-step program kind of thing, right? If you don't have
Mhm.
support, if you don't join community, if you isolate, this will never work for you, not
No.
long term. And I think we learned that from the pandemic. People need
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
So, and we need time. We need time with people. Things you can't get in a doctor's office where you're going every 3 months to meet with someone for 15 minutes. It's just
Yeah.
not enough. And so that's where, we've been doing our program online using coaching, community, and meal plans, making it simple, bite-sized information that doesn't overhaul your whole day. And so that's when we decided to create the app. And so our app that's launching, the Type 2 Diabetes Transformation app, we'll be doing everything in bite-sized, micro 5 minutes, lessons with
Yeah.
the resources to complete, to put them in action, and the community and coaching to make it personalized, to target everyone's individual root causes for their insulin resistance. So not only they can become controlled, but eventually reverse their diabetes.
So you are helping them to get educated. You're helping them to learn how to eat.
Hmm.
Are you helping them on the mindfulness side of that too?
Oh yeah, big time.
Mhm.
So we
Mhm.
have specific even modules and pieces in the program for emotional eating, over
Mhm.
craving, mindless eating, habit
Right.
eating, and how to control our thoughts. So I call it the dream model in the app.
Yeah.
But without going into too much detail, it's kind of like, the same theory that's been going on forever. So basically, you have circumstances, and some of those are derived from our previous actions, but some of those circumstances, God derived or whatever you believe in, right?
Right.
And those circumstances lead to specific thoughts in our heads. Okay.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
those thoughts lead to certain emotions, and those emotions always lead to certain actions and certain results or a manifestation, if you will.
Yeah.
So, on us as humans, we're the only species that can control our own thoughts, meaning we can choose to change our thought about something. We can't change
Right.
the circumstance, but we
Right.
can change the thoughts. And if we
Right.
can change the thoughts, we can change the emotions. And if we can change the emotions, the actions and results will follow. So that's a huge part of our
100%.
program.
100%. And it's hard. That is a hard thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, well, I know people don't want to try, or they quit too soon, or they don't understand that you have to take the action every day. But
Yes.
the outcome, the other side of it, that's where the reward is,
It's the best
right?
part. It's the best
Yeah.
part. And if you can overcome, I think this to anything, right? When you
Mm,
overcome something that has plagued you or been a big issue for a good majority of your life,
yeah.
then you know you can overcome anything. So once you tackle that, I notice people go through my program, once they tackle their sugar, they're on to the next, the next, the next. It's just like the
Mhm.
whole world opens up. You become limitless in a way. So it
Yeah.
is pretty amazing. Yeah, that thought work is the key. Huge key.
So one of the things I like to talk about is being vulnerable, and I think it's very hard to be vulnerable, especially if we have things that we have pushed down for so long, and we put these walls up around us, and we think they are protecting us, but in the reality is that they're making us sicker and keeping us sick. So to bring those walls down and be vulnerable and ask for help is really hard, but it is a key part to healing. So, what would you say to someone who's struggling with that emotional side to their health journey? They're feeling stuck, ashamed, or hopeless.
Yeah, I would say is that I've been there. I mean, I
Mhm,
applied to endocrinology fellowship, morbidly obese, and I was afraid. I didn't tell anyone. No
mhm,
one knew I was diabetic. I told no
mm,
one. So I get it better than anyone. I was ashamed that said, if I go to this interview and tell them I'm diabetic and I'm obese and this is what I want to, I mean,
yeah,
it was too much for me. So what I would say is that is it doesn't matter how many years it's been, your body's not broken, right? Your mind and body are not broken. You can reverse this. We've had people from after they've had a heart attack come and reverse their diabetes. We had people on 180 units of insulin, get off their medications within even 12 weeks and reverse their diabetes. So the reality
amazing.
is it is. And so what I would say is, I promise your body's not broken. You can do this. And I want to make this as accessible as for you as possible, which is why actually I did do the app, because I found it takes a lot for people to get on a phone call. It gets a lot for someone to actually come and show up. I can't tell you how
Mhm.
many people book a new consult, right? And then they just don't show because it
No, that
is a lot
happens
and it's
so often.
overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah.
So the app, do something like this. Just click the app and just start with the first 5 minutes, the
It
welcome. And then
is
from there,
yeah.
that's it. And that's like anything, right? If you go to a meeting, right? The first time you go in the meeting, everyone's giving you their number. Someone's trying
Yep.
to help you, right? Same
Mhm,
deal.
mhm.
Join something where there's a group, a community, professionals to give you advice, and then the step-by-step plan. And as long as you just do the things, if you show up, you will get the results.
Yeah.
So show up for
Show
yourself.
up.
Show up. You can fix your life 100%.
So
So,
your program has helped over 500 people. You shared that with me.
yes.
Can you share one of the powerful transformational stories with us? One that really stands out for you?
I think, I think one that stands out to me a lot is Colleen. I started seeing Colleen. She had a heart attack. And so she saw me on four injections a day of insulin.
Mm,
And, she obviously was very worried, very concerned. Her A1C was over 14.4, sugars are over 400. And so now, her A1C is down to 6. She's completely off insulin. And
mm.
she's traveled, I think, 13 countries this year. She travels with one of her best friends
Wow.
around the world. And so she literally comes back to see me after each trip. So I will say, I think her story is very powerful. And then I was in between two stories. Another one is Denise. I have to say too, because I love my clients. My clients are
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And the best is the relationships, that form from that. But Denise came to me. She's diabetic 34 years. Okay. So not
Mm,
new onset. And
mhm.
she said she had been overweight her whole life, was on 180 units of insulin. And this summer she got off all insulin in 12 weeks. And she said she's at her lowest weight since before college. And
Yeah.
so I said that one was great. That was a great one. And she was so focused. And the best part about being online, you know what I mean? You can interact with people from other countries, and so
Anywhere. That's
yeah, so
right.
it's crazy. And the best thing is now with all the technology, yes, we're in a very toxic environment, right? Our world is so toxic right now.
Yeah.
But the beautiful part is our technology has just jumped through the roof. So we have so many ways to heal and
Mhm.
so many holistic avenues to try. And so
Mhm.
it's never been a better time to be a diabetic. I will say that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there are so many answers out there now, and I'd say that you are one of those success stories too. A very incredible, powerful, transformational story. And I know it's hard. It's hard, and there's a lot of people out there that are suffering with obesity and struggling with overeating and not understanding all the factors, right? There's so much of it is, well, I'm just going to give up because I can't lose the weight. And we didn't even talk about hormones and all of that that go along with it.
Yes, it's so much to it, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that's one of the things is when it comes to insulin resistance, yes, there's weight, yes, there's overeating sugar, but there's also your liver health, your gut health. And so when we talk about hormones, gut health is not just linear like, oh, eat whole foods. It's way more than that. So example, when we start to go through perimenopause and menopause, we lose estrogen.
Hmm.
And estrogen does a few things. Well, it lowers our muscle mass. So remember, we said insulin has the sugar go to the muscle, liver, fat. So if you lose muscle, where's that sugar going to go? The
Hmm.
liver and the fat, right? Hence belly
Hmm.
fat.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that happens is it changes our gut microbiome when we lose estrogen. And
Hmm.
so when that happens, we have less of that good bacteria. Again, we develop belly fat and have insulin resistance. So it's very well known these hormones, but then there's also cortisol, right? Cortisol, that stress hormone. And
Hmm.
so if you don't sleep and you're a workaholic, well, it will catch up, believe it or not, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
absolutely will raise your cortisol and raise ghrelin, that hunger hormone. So
Yeah.
sometimes we don't even know why we're hungry, right? But a lot
Yeah.
of it has to do with the sugar, the weight, the sleep, the cortisol, everything. There's so much to it. And so there's even, we talk about those toxins, right? Environmental toxins, mycotoxins, heavy metals, they affect us. And people
Yeah.
don't know you can test for these things and you can
Yeah, you
remove these
can.
things. And the
Yeah.
reason people don't test and check these things out is because maybe it's not covered by insurance, right? And the
Hmm.
reason is because It's terrible to say, but big pharma doesn't have a drug to attack all those things.
Yeah.
And if everyone got tested for this and this was covered by insurance, everyone would have to be responsible. And that would be scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that is where it's at. And it's that awareness. And once you start diving in, you go through that each layer of awareness. That's
Mhm.
where, 93% of the country is metabolically defunct. They've come up with that they look at their panels. 93% do not have a normal metabolic panel. And
Wow.
so the reality is that we need to become aware. We're getting
Mm.
sicker.
We
We
are.
live as a nation, we are a very developed country, but we live way shorter lives than other developed countries. And there's a reason for that. And so,
Mhm.
there's so many
Absolutely.
things to it, but it's much more than just one of those things. You need to tackle them all and you need to find a way to have that in one place to do it. And so
Yep.
that's what I did is I took so people didn't have to go through decades like me to figure it out. They can just actually go step by step, bite size by bite size and work all the way through that.
I am all about one step in front of the other,
Yeah.
making a change in bite-sized pieces because it can be so overwhelming when it comes to this. And I get it because I've gone through recovery. I've had to make every change in my life to now live the life that I am living. And that's mind, body, spirit.
Yeah.
And it all works together. It all works together. So, two things. I would love for you, what is one small impactful step someone could make from listening to this today? And then, of course, how can we discover the app and get in touch with you and help these people move forward to a better life?
So the first thing is just start. Doesn't
Mm,
matter what it is, just start. So honestly, if it's joining this application or even going on YouTube, there's so much information out there. I have a whole page of free information as well for people to check out. But even if it's not that, it's just go for a walk, do anything that just moves you. Just
mm,
start, start, start. Whatever it is, don't do what you did yesterday. Just
yeah,
change one little thing. And
yeah,
then let those little things add up until you're ready to dive deep if you're not ready yet.
yeah,
That's okay. It's okay not to be ready.
yeah,
We all aren't ready, right? If I was, right, even though I knew this was coming and then it did come, I would have fixed it right away, but I wasn't ready. And
right.
so I would say just do one little thing. And then as far as the app goes, you go to type 2 diabetesremission.com. Again, it's type 2 diabetesremission.com and join our waitlist. The app is launching March 1st. And so those who sign up now will get a special perk for signing on the waitlist right now. And I can't wait to guide you step by step and hold your hand through it. I'm pumped.
I know. It's so fantastic. And, thank you for the work and congratulations to you making this transformation in your life and discovering how you can help others through this app and everything that's involved, everything that we need to know. I mean, we are a machine and we have to think about it. It's not just one thing.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Everything
Mhm.
works together.
Ex-
Absolutely.
exactly. And I love that you say that. Yes, exercise is important. The way we eat is important, but there are so many more factors to it
Yeah.
that we don't even understand. And what goes on up here is a big, huge part of that. So,
Oh, if you can fix this, the rest falls into place.
yeah,
You can
yeah.
start there, that's even better, but I do find diabetics want to start with the food first, but I agree with
Sure.
you. I think if you start here, the rest would completely just happen. But,
Yeah.
everyone's in a different place, but I agree with you completely there. Your mind affects everything.
It does. It does. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Yasmin, for coming on Wake Up with Marci, and I will share all your information so it's easy for people to find when I put the episode out there. But thank you again for helping us to take a deep dive into diabetes and our health and understanding so much more and moving towards a better life, which is why I am so excited and grateful to have people like you on the show.
Thank you, and thank you for having this show. It's amazing. I love
Thank
all
you.
the stories I've been hearing and yours, so inspiring. So thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
And I wish you the best of luck in everything.
Thank you, you too.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.